everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Home Instead Aging Well series. We are coming to you from the Metropolitan Utilities District Culinary Arts Theater, and today we are talking about all things love. And what better way to show your love by having a difficult conversation before a crisis. And to help us walk through those complex and sometimes murky waters, we have gerontologist and caregiver advocate Lakeland Hogan Eichenberger.
Hi, good to be back. Good to see you both.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm so happy you're here today to talk with us about these sometimes difficult subjects. But before we get started, along the lines of love, because Valentine's Day is just around the corner, Chef Peter is going to help us show our love for leftovers. What do you got cooking today?
Okay, well, we've got a couple-fold proposition. One of my favorite things to do at home, honestly, is cook with leftovers. Like, I don't call them leftovers on the second serve. What they're really called are specials.
Oh, specials. Okay.
Specials, yes. Because that's really the genesis of a special at a restaurant is here's this item that we need to get rid of, and how do we style that in such a way that it's awesome? So have your own specials at home. And so what we're doing is we're gonna start with just a Sunday pot roast. I've got a nice pork butt roast here, and we're gonna show how to put together and start to build and layer some awesome flavors in your crock pot or your cast iron enameled crock. So we'll do that one first, and then we're gonna take the leftover pork, I have some, thanks to the magic of television, and we're gonna transport that to a different part of the world, and we're gonna make tacos and an easy salsa you can make in the blender that will bring some authentic Mexican flavors to your kitchen, even though you've just had home style a couple days before.
All of that sounds so awesome, and I love the fact that you said that it's specials, because when I think of leftovers, I'm like, ugh, and then I have to make myself eat the same thing. But if I could restyle them and have a Mexican fiesta or just anything different, I would be pretty happy to eat those.
Well, and you can add spices, like you can add new flavors. We can, and especially with just a basic, pot roast vegetables, it's cooked in stock. It's a very classic. It's not bland, but it's very neutral in terms of flavor set. And we can do lots of different things with that. And by introducing some new flavors or some fresh ingredients, we can completely change that dish.
And I love that you have items here that most people have in their home. So it's not like a special trip to the grocery store.
Absolutely, yeah. We didn't want to have too crazy of a pantry. I've got some spices we use for the tacos, but fairly common for the most part, and you could use a pack of taco seasoning if that's what you had too. So I'm going to season this roast, and we're going to work on getting the sear started. So whenever we're braising, and we are braising when we're making a roast in the crock pot. Crock pot actually, it's one of the few things that I like to use a crock pot for. And you can see that I'm kind of making snow caps on this piece of meat with my salt, but that is because this is a great big dense piece of meat, and we want to season our cooking liquid a little bit with the salt and pepper we're putting on. So I don't go too crazy with the pepper, but I will get fairly aggressive with salt when you're seasoning a roast to start. Here, I'll get a little clearer view here. And you may also notice I've had that pan preheating a couple minutes already now, and we're just gonna leave that there and let it get really nice and ripping hot, because the more color that you can build on the roast, on the vegetables as we begin this, the more flavor is going to translate into your gravy or into your liquid, depending on how you want to serve that. All right, so our roast is all seasoned up. I'll move some of these out of the way.
I think it's amazing that even though nothing has hit the pan, it still smells wonderful. Like all the mix of the vegetables and the herbs you have here and the garlic, it still smells amazing.
Still smells good in your kitchen, yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're gonna call this pan hopefully hot enough. We're gonna add just a little bit of canola oil or some blended oil. Well, actually, our temperature's nice, and I don't know if you knew this. How well can you see in a pan? Yes. You're looking for a little bit of a shimmer to your oil. If you see that ripple when your oil hits a pan, you know that you are at a temperature that's close to smoke point, and we want as much heat to carry into this as we can. Now this And I think this feeds into our staying safe at home, right?
Yeah.
When you are laying anything into hot oil to sear or to brown, we're going to put the corner towards you down first, and we're going to lay it away from you. So if you do have a little too much oil in your pan, if it splashes away, not onto you. All right, and this is going to take a little while to build color, so we can kind of start the conversation, and I'll flag to check back in when we're ready to
And I appreciate those tips. I mean, I learned so much just in watching the master work. I learned so much. Now, Lakeland, we talked a little bit about how we're gonna talk about how to approach those difficult conversations. And when I was doing research for today, I came across something called the 40-70 rule. What is the 40-70 rule?
The 40-70 rule is something that Home Instead came up with. It was a public education campaign we started a few years back to get people talking. So when you're about 40 as an adult child and your parent is about 70, that's a good time to start having those conversations. And again, every family is a little different. So it might be a 50-70 rule, or even, people are having kids later in life. Maybe it's a 30-70 rule. But that's a good time to start talking about things like where you want to live, how you want to age, what are some of the things you would want if you couldn't make decisions for your own health care and that sort of thing. Because we often see crisis occur and families haven't had those conversations. And then that creates a lot of stress, and people are wondering, okay, what would mom or dad would have wanted, or they feel guilt over, did I make the best decision for my loved one? So that's where the idea around the 40-70 rule came in. And 4070talk.com is the website, and we have a whole host of resources. Everything from like conversation starters, because it can kind of be an awkward topic to bring up, to this really thorough, like 40-page documents called the Action Plan for Successful Aging. You can download it for free, and it goes through a variety of topics. You don't have to tackle this document all at once, but again, it gives you ideas of important conversations to have before it's too late.
Well, I love that because it has so many different topics that you don't think about that you really do have to discuss, because it is difficult, especially when there's siblings involved. Well, what would mom want? What would dad want? I think it's this. And so it just is a way of showing love, because it relieves that burden of having to try to figure everything out. So some of those topics, you mentioned living, like where do you want to live?
Yes.
Where do you want to live? Do you want to live with your adult kids? What are some of those considerations for living?
Yeah, well, we know about 90% of people want to stay in place at home as they age. But a lot of homes are not set up for aging, especially in Nebraska. For some reason, the split level home is really popular. And if you think about it, there's a lot of stairs. And so you have to think through, is my home set up to age in place? Are there modifications we need to make, large and small, to ensure that we can continue to age in place here? And it might be, things like putting in grab bars, or it might be remodeling the bathroom to remove a tub and put a walk-in shower. The Action Plan for Successful Aging, it kind of walks you through that. But another great resource we have at Home Instead is a home safety checklist, and you can download that for free as well, and it takes you through every room of the house. And it could be just as simple as like reducing clutter and making sure your walkways are open and clear so that there's not a tripping hazard, because a lot of times people want to stay at home, but they might have hazards that could cause falls, that could compromise their independence and ability to age in place. So lots of things to consider there.
Well, and what's amazing too is that there are changes that can be made that don't seem to cost that much.
Yes.
But they can, or they're small changes, but they can make a big difference, such as the height of the toilet.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, as we get older, sometimes it can be harder to get up and down off the toilet. So just, replacing that. I know toilets are anywhere from like $150 to $300, and you compare that to the cost of a hospital stay, it makes it seem a lot more reasonable.
So, and when you think about it, changing the toilet and adding some grab bars, really increasing the availability to actually stay in your home.
Yeah.
Just by making those small changes.
Exactly. It actually enhances your independence, instead of some people see it as, well, that's me admitting I'm getting older, or maybe it'll make my kids think that I can't stay at home longer. But actually, those things are going to help you stay more independent for a longer period of time. And so again, that's why it's good to talk to your kids like, hey, this is why we're putting in grab bars, just to make our environment a little safer. And I know my grandparents put grab bars in at a time when my grandpa was having a few knee issues. He recovered from that, but they had put those grab bars in at the time, and now they're so thankful that they have them because it just provides extra security and peace of mind for my mom and her siblings.
Well, it's interesting because you said, there's concern about getting older, and someone will know. We know, because we're getting older too.
Everyone is.
So it's okay
Yeah.
to have a frank conversation and address the reality of what's actually happening.
Yes.
Some of the topics on there I expected, but some I was surprised about. Like one is dating.
Yeah.
Dating is a big deal for the aging population.
It is, yeah. One of the sections is all about relationships and dating. So it's helping you reflect on who is in your social circle. If you are widowed or divorced, are you open to dating? And that can be hard for adult children to accept. And so it just kind of helps you think through, as you age, who do you want in your life? And while the check or the action plan for successful aging, it doesn't have, a whole ton of tips on dating, but that is a hot topic kind of in this arena, and you're seeing more dating sites for the 55 and older population. And so there's things to consider like safety, just like, young people have to consider safety when they're doing online dating and that sort of thing. The same applies to older adults, but I have seen so many couples come together later in life and really enhance each other's, final chapter. And so it's something to consider. But again, it's sometimes hard for kids to accept. So having that open conversation and dialogue can be helpful.
So Peter, I want to go back to you for just a second because this pork sizzling, I don't know if there's a more delicious smell
right?
than sizzling pork than the fat rendering out. And it looks like you threw some celery in there and some onions.
Yeah, so the vegetables that are in the skillet here, and I'm going to lean this forward a little bit. The vegetables that are in the skillet are not going to hit the plate after this is done braising. What I'm trying to do is develop some nice color on these couple of carrots, on these onions, on this celery, so that we're just layering more dark brown flavors into your crock pot or into the pot you're cooking on the stove. You need to build that up to get that, the brown gravy flavor. You know what that actually is?
Yes. What?
It's burnt. It's like vegetable ash. It's almost charred onion. So it's actually a vegan flavor note. And if you see like kitchen bouquet or some of those seasonings, those are vegetables that are cooked to a really deep level of almost burnt. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to build up that flavor because you won't get those deep flavors once you're in the slow cooker. This part in the pan is your most important step to start your flavor off on the right foot.
Well, my family is from the South, and a gravy is very important to our family. I'm known as making the best gravy because of using these type techniques of just having that fat rendering out and cooking the vegetables with it as well.
Well, it's patience too. You can't rush it. And if you have a lower power stove, you just kind of have to wait. But the beauty of this is that this can get done the night before. So you can do this part where you have everything seared. We're going to deglaze our pan with some wine in a minute here and set it up. But you can do that in your crock pot and chill it back down and then start that in the morning on your way out the door if you're still working, or if you just don't want to have to mess around in the morning. You could do this when the kitchen's already dirty the evening before.
Well, and I hadn't considered taking just a big hunk of meat like that and searing it in a pan. So I guess that's something that I'll just have to add to my repertoire now.
And I love that you can cook it the night before, because I'm one that loves to dump things in a crock pot before I head to work. So I love that tip. And
I've always got my crock pot. When I do use a crock pot, it's always fully set in the fridge the night before, so that I can take the time to develop flavors the way you want. Because that's not happening at 5:36 in the morning.
No.
All right, now we're just about. You know what? I think we can probably deglaze this. We're pretty close to where we want to be. We've got this kind of deep brown. You're not going to get
beautiful
like that red brown you get with beef, but we're going to try and get as many sides as we can, but I think we're right about where we want to be. And I'll show you how to deglaze this.
It's just a beautiful caramel color.
Yeah, just like dark golden on everything, and all the fond that's in this pan. You can see these brown drippings that are hanging out in the pan. That's all flavor too that we want to keep. So my onions are getting good color. We're going to add a couple cloves of garlic.
Gotta have garlic, at least in my opinion.
Get a little color on that too.
And I noticed you didn't add the garlic in earlier because sometimes, does it cook too fast?
You can burn it up too much. I could have put it in earlier, but it will just, the length of time we're cooking it will just break down. And sometimes it will be the first thing to get a little too dark. Okay, love where we're going with our color, and we're gonna add a little wine. So your wine's gonna help to dissolve all these delicious brown bits that are in the bottom of the pan.
To get those
the
delicious
fond.
crackling pieces?
Oh yeah, you gotta dissolve all this. Wine works better. Alcoholic beverages in general work better than just water because the boiling point of alcohol is lower, so they tend to get a little more violent and help dissolve things a little bit better.
And that's better than broth as well?
Broth, yeah, broth totally works. You could use, a lot of times when I do pork roast, I'll do beer. Beer and onions go really great with pork, so sometimes deglaze with a beer. You could use brandy if you were feeling fancy. You could use apple juice, can of Coke. There's no real wrong way. But this is kind of the traditional French angle, so we'll start with a little white wine. We're going to cook it until that wine's pretty much almost gone. Add a little thyme. Season this braising liquid a little bit more.
You haven't added anything like a thickener, but it's already kind of starting to thicken up a bit.
And that's just the reduction of the wine. And I usually don't add a thickener before we cook the roast. So I like to get this to a stage where all the things in here are pretty big chunks that I can just pull out, and then I'll strain the liquid and I'll thicken the liquid later to make gravy, rather than attempting to add flour. You can add a little flour, it doesn't really hold up. You can add tapioca to thicken as you go. And now we're just about dry, so I'm going to add in some stock here.
Another note to self.
It smells so good. Oh my goodness.
And I know, so I've got some potatoes here. If you're going to put potatoes in the crock pot, you got to perch them on top of the roast. Never put them underneath because they'll just get too done. Your carrots and potatoes.
Okay.
I like adding them halfway through, but if you're gone for the day, you got to kind of just balanced on the top of the mountain so they don't get too overdone.
Wow.
And do you have to poke holes at all in the potatoes?
Not in this instance. The only
Okay.
time you really need to vent the potatoes in the microwave
Okay.
because they
good to
can
know.
explode. Have anybody ever exploded one? I've heard they legitimately do. I've never done
I've
it.
heard that. I haven't had an exploding potato, but I have heard that. Well, they say you eat with your eyes first, and this is definitely a work of art.
Yes.
So there's our Sunday pork pot roast, ready to spend some time in the crock pot. Or in this case, we've got a 250 degree oven. We'll put a lid on this and we'll let this work. And this will be done when we come back in a month. Not actually, that's a different episode. But we want to give it some time.
You come home to this, what a welcome from a long, hard day. Your meal's already done. It smells amazing.
Yes.
For me, it smells like Grandma's house.
Yes.
When I come home to a roast like that.
Yeah.
And my grandparents lived in Chicago, on the east side of Chicago. And especially pork roast, for whatever reason, when I smell that, like walking in the door on a cold winter day, it just takes me there. So
I love how smells and memories go hand in hand.
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's some of the strongest memories you can have are smell memories.
Absolutely. Or even like you said, just the time of year. My son came over the other day, it was when it was snowing, and he's like, there's no soup, I just expected some. And so you just expect certain things based upon the time of year, based upon the smells that are happening.
Yes. Absolutely. And for me on snow days, we always made chocolate chip cookies growing up. So that is kind of my memory association when it's snowing.
Oh, that's awesome.
A good chocolate chip cookie. Can't beat that.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about health, because
Yes.
that's one of those touchy subjects. And what I find interesting is many times people don't age the same way their friends age.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, we're all so different. And I think at one point I was talking to a geriatric physician, and he said, I wanted to go into geriatrics because older adults, they're all so different. They all have such complex backgrounds. Babies, they're all pretty much the same. I have no interest in babies. And so that's one of the things I love about working in the field of gerontology is everybody's experience is different, and what happens to you across your life and your genetic makeup impact your health in your later years. But we're finding in research that there's a lot we can do in our younger years, and it's never too late to start these things. Things we can do to help maintain our health longer in life. So we have our lifespan, how many years we're going to live, but we also have our health span. And for some people, I have 2 sets of grandparents, and if you were to put them side by side, they've aged differently, even though that they're about the same age. So you could have a 75-year-old who's super healthy and active and running marathons still, and you can have another 75-year-old that has multiple comorbidities, so like a diabetes, hypertension, multiple chronic conditions that's really impacting their health, limiting their mobility. So yeah, people do age differently, but we're learning there's a lot we can do in terms of health that can help kind of extend that lifespan and match it a little closer to, or expand our health span to match it closer to our lifespan.
And it's never too late to eat a little better, to
Exactly.
move a little bit more, to drink a little bit more water.
Yes, absolutely. And in the field of gerontology, we talk a lot about frailty. And we know that frailty is something that can be more limiting in terms of your health span. So frailty, some signs of that include, general weakness, low energy, kind of just more lethargic. And there's some things we can do like exercise, making sure you're moving every day. And it doesn't have to be, a CrossFit workout. It could be, a walk around the block. Eating healthy or a balanced diet, because sometimes, as you get older, your appetite starts to wane, or you're not smelling and tasting quite like you used to. I know my grandma's very frustrated that my grandpa's lost his kind of sense of taste and smell. And she's a great cook, so she always says, I feel like I make these delicious meals and my grandpa doesn't even appreciate them anymore. But things do change as we age, and so we need to make sure that we continue to engage in those healthy habits. And one healthy habit is social engagement. And I don't think we always associate that with our health, but we're learning that staying socially active, having a close-knit circle of family and friends, it's really important. Isolation and loneliness can have detrimental health impacts. So there's so much we can do to maintain that health as we get older.
And I think what we learned from COVID too is there's a lot of different ways to be social.
Exactly.
And once again, it might not look like how your friend is being social.
Yes. Well, and you're right. There's a lot of opportunity to engage virtually now. Even just joining a class like this, it's a way to be socially engaged and connected. For everyone, social connectedness looks different. So one person might be very content with having, 5 to 6 social interactions a week, while somebody else might be content having 5 to 6 social interactions every day. So when you're talking with your loved one, you might want to ask, how are you feeling in terms of your social life? Are you feeling engaged? Do you have things that you want to do, like maybe it's a book club or a knitting club, and maybe they don't have transportation to that, or they need just a little bit of support to get to those activities, or maybe that activity needs to be modified to meet them where they're at. But that, again, is such an important part of your health at any age, is how well connected you are. But there's a lot of ways to stay connected.
Well, you mentioned social interaction, so I just want to mention that if you have questions at any time, you could go ahead and throw those questions into the chat. We do have somebody monitoring. And also, don't worry about what Peter's doing, because we are going to send you the recipes at the end, so you don't have to stand here and write down everything that he's doing and every spice. We will definitely get that to you.
And I wrote them down ahead of time, too.
Oh,
Just
that's
wanna point
great.
that out. We didn't just do that as we're going. We had that all planned for.
Well, it looks like we're switching a little bit from Grandma's pot roast to something else.
Yeah, Viva Mexico. We're headed south, and not fully authentically. I'm the first to own that, but at least more in the flavor set. We're closer to a taqueria than we are to Taco Bell for sure. And that brings some great fresh flavors to the table as well. You've got these deep sort of classical French cooked roasted flavors in your roast, but now we're going to spice things up with something brighter and fresher, and frankly with a little less gravy. So, which I love gravy, but you can only have so much, right?
Well, I guess, so they say.
Everything in
They
moderation.
keep telling us moderation, right? And this blender salsa, so the first thing I'm going to do is mix up a little quick blender salsa. And we have just a can of Rotel, or you could use the generic diced tomatoes and green chilies. We had some fresh cut tomatoes that we've got here. We're going to use about another can worth of these.
I like the combination of canned
Yeah.
and fresh.
Yeah,
I was
and
just
you can
thinking that.
you can use canned and fresh, or you can use just a can of diced tomatoes too. This is fairly flexible. It's what you have around. But if you do have fresh tomatoes from the garden, it just kicks this up to a whole nother level. So we'll get some of our diced in here. We've got our Rotels. We've got about half a jalapeno. We're gonna do like about half a cup of diced onion here.
This is something I make almost every night. Salsa.
Fresh salsa, yeah.
Yeah. I think my vitamin C level must be very high because I eat tomatoes practically every night.
Every day. They're great for you. And actually, the lycopene content in tomatoes is actually when you have to cook them to activate that and make it bioavailable. So, in that case, your canned tomato actually has one leg up.
I see.
Only for lycopene, probably not for vitamin C and some of the other nutrients. But some things, having a blend of cooked and fresh, in some cases, makes different nutrients available to your body. So,
Well, and for this, I love trying out. I mean, I have my tried and true, which is what you're doing. That's my tried and true. That's my recipe. But I like to mix it up. Like I might throw in some serrano peppers instead of jalapenos.
well, and it's what you have. There's no reason to go to the store. I mean, if you have,
Right.
maybe to get some fresh cilantro and a jalapeno, but with the other items, you can kind of flex with it. And don't be afraid to play with the flavor a little bit and change things up.
Well, and it seems like it's pretty easy enough to blend your fresh and to blend your maybe canned or even your spices.
Yeah, and all of these we can, minimal chopping, and because it's going in the blender, it doesn't have to be perfect. Close is good in this case. Let's see, did I have another garlic? I think I used all my garlic. That's okay, because we can be flexible, right? All right, so
Absolutely
we have all
flexible.
these, and we need some lime juice. We're gonna do some salt. Start with about a half teaspoon. And do a pinch of cumin.
Every time I watch you cook, I leave away with some tip that I utilize that makes people think I'm a cooking genius and I'm just copying what you're
And you're
doing.
just copying. Well, that's.
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
you learn something new every day. And every time I teach a class, and every time I do a demo, I usually come up with something along the way that it changes the way I do
Yes.
it. You're constantly learning and growing, no matter how old you are.
Yeah, which
Or
is
how- yeah.
a good way to keep your
Yeah.
your brain nimble. It's learning
Keeps
new
you
things.
nimble, yeah. And then we'll do about a half of a lime here.
I love how colorful salsa is.
Oh, it's
Yes.
great. And it just smells so nice and fresh. It's nice to have something that's bright.
Smells kind of like summer.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
those fresh tomatoes especially. All coming together.
And this is a pretty high power. Did I get you?
You're good.
I tried to cover it.
Hey,
trying
when
to
you're
be
when you're in the
covered up,
kitchen, stuff happens.
It does.
You just gotta accept it as a part of it.
If only I had my mouth open over here. I could have
What's
got
that
a
ready
little
to
taste.
I mean, if
Let's
we're
see
going to
where
be
that-
close to the food, you know.
Yeah.
And we'll let this sit and continue to marry our flavors, but let's see where we're at here.
And if you like it spicier, I like that you can kick
Yeah, you
that
can add a
up.
little bit more.
Yeah. You know, this
pretty
is
good.
so perfect for Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
Super
This
Bowl
would totally
weekend.
pivot. So this one does have a little, because it's pretty
right.
hot jalapeno. It's got a good,
That is so good. Oh yeah, I do get a little bit of that kick.
yeah, no, that one, that pepper's got a little punch. Which is, I love it that way, but you can experiment with that and you can decide how much do I think I need to add.
That is so
Easy.
yummy. Like, I'm a texture person, so I love that tomatoey flavor. I love the crunch of the onion and the cilantro and the heat of that jalapeno. Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Just send you a bowl. We can
Yeah, that's
do that in a minute. We'll have some to go with our tacos in just a few minutes here. So that's the other thing that we're going to be starting to make. I'll let you guys get into your next segment, but I'm putting in a pitch for our tacos del frigo.
Oh, wow.
So I was trying to come up with a clever name for this taco recipe, right, for your leftover tacos, and discovered that frigorifico is a Spanish terminology for refrigerator. I think it's used more in Spain. We call it el frigo, so you can sound muy auténtico, but we have tacos del frigo.
Love it.
Fridge tacos.
Sounds amazing. I absolutely love that.
Coming soon to a Zoom demonstration near you.
This just reminds me of just summer, those fresh flavors that you get. I mean, that just, you want to be sitting outside, you know, I'm pretending. You just want to be sitting outside. Like, the weather's been so nice, and then I'll forget that, you know, it's not summer.
No,
I want to ride my bike, but the sun is going down by the time I get off work because it's not summer.
Yes.
So this is a nice little treat.
It is. Well, I think that's what's so fun about food is it can kind of transport you. And this time of year, you know, the holidays are done. And sometimes we see, you know, older adults kind of have a little dip in their emotional state. Maybe they're having a little depression because, you know, family is not around like they were throughout the holidays. So having something fun to do, like cook a meal or kind of make it themed. Maybe, you know, you're cooking these tacos and you're looking at past photos of days at the beach or your trip to Mexico or somewhere sunny. It could be just kind of a fun way to lighten up this time of year, because I know at least here in Nebraska it can get kind of cold and there's not a lot going on, so it can be a fun way to spice things up, quite literally.
Well, what I really like about this is, say, for example, if you are one of those, if you are aging and you just live by yourself, or maybe you live with your spouse, the way that you can make these different meals, so it kind of saves on cooking throughout the week.
Yes, absolutely. I think at any time you can kind of simplify something and make multiple meals out of kind of one effort is really helpful. And we find that older adults, speaking of, you know, eating with another person, we find that older adults eat more and eat healthier when they eat with a companion. So if you have an older loved one, you know, that maybe lives alone, creating, you know, regular meal times together, maybe it's a Sunday dinner or a monthly breakfast outing. Not only does it incorporate that social engagement that we just talked about, it also ensures that your loved one is getting some proper nutrition. And so that's just something to consider as families are, you know, looking to support their loved one. Making sure that they have opportunities to share meals together can be, there can be so many benefits to that.
Absolutely. Another one of those topics that might be a little touchy is driving.
Yes. Yeah, driving, you know, if you think about it, it's often associated very closely with your independence. I know in some bigger cities that have public transportation, maybe not so much, but here in Nebraska, most people drive. And so at some point, a lot of people do have to give up driving. Maybe it's because of a medical condition, maybe their mobility, their vision is changing. And so that can be a really tough conversation to have. But I think what's most important for families when they're approaching that, you know, conversation is to make sure that there's an alternative. So if they do have to give up driving, that the family has thought of ways that they can still get to where they want and need to go. That's really, really important. And it also in some situations, it doesn't have to be, okay, we're taking away the keys tomorrow. It can kind of be maybe a gradual transition. I know with my grandma, she self-admitted that, I don't feel comfortable driving after dark anymore. And so she does not drive after dark. And if we have a family gathering tomorrow night, we're all getting together for a birthday celebration, and somebody will make sure to pick her up on the way because it'll be after dark. So, you can kind of help your loved one transition, or maybe you encourage them to do their outings not at rush hour, but on those kind of lower trafficked times of day. Or, if they do have to give up driving, what are the options? Is it family and friends are going to drive them? Maybe it's somebody who's already going where they want to go, like to a book club or a church service. Or maybe rideshare apps. Uber and Lyft are more available than they've ever been. And so helping your loved ones set up that kind of transportation, there are more options available. But making sure that you involve the older adult in that conversation and find solutions hopefully can help. And I know that, again, it is challenging, but, again, in that action plan for successful aging, there's some great resources. So I would direct people there for more tips and conversation starters around that really sensitive topic.
Well, I really appreciate that it's about problem solving, as you mentioned. It's not about, no, you can't drive. It's, you want to get here, let's get you here and figure out what that looks like. Does it look like public transportation? Does it look like Uber? Does it look like your grandson picking you up and taking you? You can still go, it just looks a little bit different.
Absolutely. And I think, when you think about, those alternates, and a lot of times families, they want to offer transportation to their loved one, but that person says, well, I don't want to be a burden to you. And so, making sure that you're explaining, it's not a burden. We'd rather have you get to where you want to go and socially interact with those you want to interact with. And please don't see it as a burden. Or maybe the grandson, there's an agreement made where he gets to make a little extra cash, driving grandma around. That benefits the grandson, helps him kind of maybe save up for college or for something that he really wants, and gets grandma or grandpa where they want to go. So it doesn't have to be, this kind of guilt trip or that sort of a thing. It can be a benefit to the whole family and new ways for everyone to interact.
Well, all right, Chef Peter. Now, I know that you're busy working over there, but we do have a couple of questions, and they're directed to you. One of the questions is, why tapioca, and how do you prepare it ahead of time?
And how do you prepare it ahead of time? So it's actually your tapioca it's in the red box. I think it's Minute makes it. I'm trying to visualize it. Red box, brown stuff on label. Usually, I'm going to say 3 tablespoons-ish can go in with your roast in most cases. That's a full guesstimate. Could be too thick, could be too thin, but the cool thing about tapioca is it breaks down really slow. So if you were to add cornstarch at the beginning of a pot roast and leave it in the crock pot for 8 hours, when you return home, the thickening power of the starch will have gone away. So it will no longer be holding it together. Flour may hold up, but not in the same way, and it can kind of get in the way of braising, but those little tapioca pearls will slowly dissolve into your cooking liquid, so that and it'll look like a cornstarch thickened gravy, but you'll have sort of a clear thickened liquid in your vessel, and they sort of just slowly dissolve into the juices.
Nice. I've never used tapioca.
It was in some stew recipes my mom used to do. Like, that's one of the things that came from mom's cookbook recipes was try this. If you get a slow cookbook, there's usually something in there that uses that angle, but that can be a good one if you don't want to go through the trouble of straining your liquids to make a gravy.
And we have another question for you. Dried cilantro. Can you use dried cilantro?
You could. Freeze dry to be better. I think they make straight dehydrated, but if you I think it's Lighthouse brand. I think there's some store brands too that are freeze-dried herbs, and they carry more of the fresh flavor. I've also, there's some pastes out there too. And
they come in kind of like the tube in the refrigerated section. I like that for grated ginger and some other spices. So that's a good tip.
You could probably mince it, depending on what you're doing with it. So if you're going to add it to finish a braised chicken dish, or at the end of something you're going to mix it into, you could probably chop it up, put it in a little bit of oil, and freeze it too, and take little chunks. You could do the same thing with pesto.
Well, since we're talking about cilantro, I have gotten in the habit of using all of my cilantro. When I first started cooking, I would kind of throw the stems away. Now I use the stems, leaves, everything.
Oh yeah. Well, and cilantro is a really interesting, it's an interesting plant, right? Because the plant actually gives us 3 different usable products. Were you aware of this? Mm-hmm. The root, the leaves, and the seeds. So the root gets used a lot in Thai cuisine and gets smashed into like green curry. And then your leaves are the cilantro leaves that you'll find in Mexican cuisine. And then coriander is actually the seed of that plant.
I did not know that.
So 3 different, and they all taste totally different.
And delicious.
Yeah.
It's so amazing, the different spices and the uses for them. I recently got to travel to Sri Lanka on our honeymoon, and we went to a spice garden, and they talked us through all the different spices. They're really well known for their spices there, and just the different uses for them, not only in cooking, but kind of in medicine, more of a natural medicine. So it's so interesting to learn that cilantro, 3 different ways.
Yeah, I love it. I always think that's fascinating. So I want to show the start of our tacos del frio.
Yes.
This is your basic method for making any sort of a leftover things taco. We're going to build a little sofrito, which is just like some sauteed vegetables. So we got some garlic and some onions. And I don't want a ton of color on this, so I am going to add a little salt, because I'm not looking to make it dark brown, but I want to give it a little sweat. We'll back our heat off just a little. Let's get a little jalapeno to go along with that party. I got ahead of myself and forgot to cut more jalapeno. And you don't have to add hot peppers to this. You can flex this however you want to your tastes. The idea is you just want to get some onions, some garlic. You want to build a little flavor base that's going to change. It's going to be the platform to change the flavor profile of this pork from being, French or pot roast to we want to have more of a Mexican flavor set here. So we're going to start with some fresh aromatics, peppers and onions.
And here's some garlic, the magic of television.
Oh, look at that. That's beautiful.
One, it looked like when you were chopping up that jalapeno, you cut on the outside.
Yeah, it was just.
And so you didn't have all the seeds in there, which are the hot part.
Which are the hot part. Yeah, I didn't have the seeds in. Thank you, garlic.
The garlic fairy made it.
Yeah, the garlic,
The garlic fairy
is
was looking out for
wonderful
your lunch.
at her job. Just wonderful.
All right, we'll just mince a little of this. You can use a garlic press. I don't know what's easier if I had, if it was harder to move my hands. I'm trying to think. If anybody's watching in the chat, let me know. Do you guys use a slap chop? Do you use a knife? Do you use a little mini chopper? Like what's?
I cheat and use the garlic that's already minced that comes in the jar.
Oh, there's Well, I saw somewhere where they said if you're using the garlic that's already been minced, that you have to use twice as much because it's not as fragrant. Is that true?
I would think it's a different flavor profile than fresh minced. It's not quite the same.
Good to know.
I'm not saying it's not delicious, but it's a little different. It has a different note to it. Okay, so here we go. Now we've got our garlic, we've got our peppers, and our onion. I'm gonna add a little black pepper, and you can sculpt this the way you want to. We don't have to be set fast in what our taco spice looks like. I gave a good basic recipe on the cards, but you could even use just taco seasoning if that's what you like. But I'm gonna take a note from cooks in India, and I'm gonna add my spices while I'm still sweating so that we start to extract some of the oil-soluble flavors out. So I like some oregano. We're gonna make this a little more Mexico than Texas. So we got a little oregano. I'm gonna do a little bit of allspice. And then we've got some cumin. I've got some chili powder, and this is just your basic issue chili powder. We'll do about a tablespoon. I wanna build some good flavor here. Just kinda let this get going in our fat, and this is going to start smelling pretty awesome.
Oh, it does. All of those,
Oh, yeah, there we go.
seasonings are kind of
You
wafted
just smell that
through
blooming,
the air.
right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then we'll let that just a little bit more. I also have some tomato paste. So we don't want this to be tomato dominant, but tomato will help with our brown flavor, and it'll give it a nice, little bit of sweetness, sometimes a little tang. Have you bought tomato paste like this before?
I have not.
So you can get tomato paste in a toothpaste tube, and it is absolutely fabulous. I'm facing the wrong camera. You guys can just yell at me. You can just yell at me when I'm looking in the wrong spot. Okay, so tomato paste in a tube means that you don't have to crack open a little can and then throw half of it away.
Yeah, because I
So
hate throwing
true.
half of it away.
Yeah.
So we're just going to do like a tablespoon in here. We're just going to stir this in with our spices.
All those little touches just make just that slightest difference in the flavor profile.
We're just building and layering it. There's not a lot in here, but it's worth taking 20 minutes to really care about it. Instead of just dumping it in, because it makes a really cool difference. All right, we actually wanted to cook that a little bit, and you can smell the sugars caramelize just a little bit in your tomato paste, and it will change the way you taste it. Now our deglazing liquid in this case is going to be a little bit of orange juice.
Ooh. So orange juice this time instead of wine.
Yeah, we use and it kind of harkens that. A lot of times your marinades, carne asada marinades, Cuban pork roast marinade will have citrus juices.
Well, that was one of the questions we had in our chat, which is why does wine work better to be glazed?
Because the alcohol helps dissolve. Acids do too. So if you have a juice or a wine, it does help. Oh, look at this color. I just love this. You got this deep red.
Oh yeah, that's a
Sofrito over here.
That's a thing of art right there.
Beautiful.
And then we're gonna add some leftover pork in this, and just give it a quick simmer to warm it back up. Let it take on some of those flavors, and we'll mash this into some shredded pork tacos, and we can plate up in just a minute here.
Now I want to make this tonight.
Well, you have had to make a pot roast yesterday.
I know, because I want to try those different flavors with the way you made the sofrito, or should I say sofrito? Then that makes me want to try this tonight.
And I'm chopping this, but honestly, I could have just this was so tender that I could have just put the whole bit in there.
Oh my. This is definitely, it is my pleasure to be in the kitchen today.
I agree.
It smells amazing.
Now we'll add a little stock to this just to get it warmed and simmered. And then you can adjust if you want saucier tacos, we can either add a little more moisture at the end or we can reduce it slightly. All right, so that's going. I'm gonna give this a stir and start making a platter of tacos.
Oh, that sounds amazing. We're just going to keep ourselves busy while you're making a platter of tacos. So as we're talking about having those difficult conversations, some of them could really actually be hopeful, like, what are you actually looking forward to as you age? And some of these conversations can start earlier than later.
Yeah, absolutely. As we get older, we're so used to planning for our retirement. And so financially planning for that sets you up for success in your later years. That allows you to do some fun things. So it's not all serious. You can talk about what's on your bucket list. What are the things you still want to do? Is it taking that cruise to Alaska, or going on a hot air balloon ride, or getting the family together for a trip to the mountains? You can talk through what are some of those things that are fun that you want to also accomplish in your later years, and make sure that that's part of kind of your plan for you as you age. Or maybe there's a few things that are really important to you that bring you a lot of joy. Maybe it's animals, and you want to be able to continue to have a pet in your home because it brings you a lot of joy. I know my grandparents, they have 2 little dogs, and they bring so much joy to their lives. So we want to always make sure that they can have those pets. And so it's not all serious. And again, you don't have to have all of these conversations at once. You can kind of spread them out over time. And you can talk about your wishes as an adult child and kind of relate to your parents. Sometimes people think, well, when's a good time to bring these conversations up? And really all of us should be thinking about, if we couldn't make our own decisions, who would we want to do that for us? A healthcare power of attorney, a will, especially if you have children or you get married, those kind of big milestones in your life. You as an adult child can say, hey, mom or dad, I'm working on this. I'd love to know, have you planned? And if someday I need to access those plans, like where are they? I watched my friend lose her dad, and their family did not plan because it was kind of sudden, and he was a business owner, and there was just a lot of things to work through, and it made me stop and reflect. I don't know what my parents want. And so that was a time I could bring up with my parents, hey, I'm watching my friend go through this and she's really struggling and I don't want that to be the case for me. How can we be proactive about this? And they said, oh, well, we have a lot of our plans done. You would call A, B, and C if anything were to happen to us. And that was a relief for me, knowing, okay, we have talked about some of this, or they'd planned for this and now we're talking about it, and we can carry out those wishes should, heaven forbid, that comes sooner rather than later. So, and also one thing to consider is, these plans that you put in place, they're not kind of a one and done conversation.
Right.
As you go through big life changes or you have a major health event, you're likely going to have to revisit some of these conversations. Maybe you lose a spouse. Does that change where you want to age? Maybe you would rather be in a community setting where there are other people around that you have, so you can socially interact with them. Or maybe you have a big health event and you're not able to get up and down stairs as easily anymore. Maybe you install a chairlift. Maybe you downsize to a ranch-style home instead of that 2-story. Maybe you finally make that bathroom modification that you've been talking about. So you want to revisit these conversations regularly and not just have them at one point in time and think, great, check that off the list, because it really is an evolving conversation.
Well, I think you're so right. It is an evolving conversation. And one thing I've noticed, for example, with my dad, is when he retired, he wanted to travel, and I'd call him and he'd say, I'm in Mexico. But then as he started aging a bit, now he tells me, he's studying 3 different languages.
That's amazing.
And he plays an instrument, and he says, I just want to stay home and do these things. And that's what he's doing. And he does have social interaction as well. But it seemed like it kind of shifted, so there's different seasons to aging as well.
Oh, absolutely. And some things that you might enjoy today, in a few years, you might think, I've had my fun with that, or, I kind of have different interests now, and that's okay. And I love that your dad's learning new languages. Mm-hmm. We're talking about it's never too late to learn. And so, learning a new language or reading books about history or just diving into something new that you want to explore is really good for your brain, and really you can provide social outlets. You can maybe join a book club or those types of things. So never too late to kind of grow and evolve, really at any age.
Well, at MCC in our continuing education department, it's lifelong learning. Let's say it's from age 3 to senior citizen, but there are so many amazing classes. I'm taking classes all the time, and so there's classes in cooking, there's classes in upholstery, there's classes in languages, so there's just so many interesting things. And I think that maybe when you've retired, you have some time to pursue some of the things that you've always wanted to pursue.
Absolutely. And we see actually a lot of people go on to like an encore career after they retire too. They retire, they get their honey-do list done, or they travel a little bit and they say, well, I'd like to do something else, maybe have a part-time job. And so we find a lot of people become professional caregivers in like a later season of life, and they make the best caregivers because they relate well to the clients we serve. Or maybe they've always wanted to work in a floral shop or be a barista or start their own business. And so really there's so much you can do and learn. And I love that MCC has kind of that lifelong learning opportunities that are available. So definitely encourage people to check that out.
Well, and also right now, just in this environment, as you mentioned, working in this environment right now, ages over 55 and 60 are the fastest growing part of the job market right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing more and more generations of people working together, which creates some interesting dynamics. We could have a whole nother conversation on that. But we are seeing older people staying in the workforce longer for a variety of reasons. Some out of necessity to pay for everything that they need, and some out of that desire to just kind of keep themselves busy, and then others really want to give back, and maybe instead of volunteering, they're finding jobs in kind of the job fields that you do get to give back, like senior care or health care or child care. So it's fun to see people staying engaged in the workforce into their later years.
Can you provide some tips, Lakeland, on one? I think one of the considerations is, where do you want to live? Like you mentioned, do you want to live in a home with someone, or and then how can you determine, who do you contact to determine, will your finances get you to where you want to go?
That is really important. Working with a financial planner, financial advisor, can be very helpful in kind of mapping out, okay, here are the resources I have today, and here's how much I'm going to need year over year to maintain my lifestyle, or these are things about my lifestyle I have to modify because of the income streams that I have. And a lot of people maybe didn't have the opportunity to save for retirement, and so they're going to really have to live off of Social Security. So they might need that part-time job to supplement. And some people planned really well, but it's important to still figure out how can I live within my budget. And for some people, staying in their own homes, they own their own homes. So for many, that's an affordable option to have care come into the home as opposed to moving to a community, where others might feel that, a move to a community where you kind of have an all-encompassing bill once a month to pay is a good option. But there's a lot of misconceptions around how you pay for your long-term care needs. A lot of people think, Medicare will cover it. And Medicare actually, they cover a lot of your health care expense, but not any of your long-term care needs, like home care or assisted living, those types of things. And so there's a lot of great resources on homeinstead.com. We have a funding solutions guide. So if you just go to homeinstead.com, put in the search bar funding solutions, there's a guide there that kind of helps you think through the different funding options. But that again could be a whole nother discussion, because it is a little complex. But it's important to know and be, planning for your future finances as you age.
Lakeland, I have a question for you that's going to rely on your background. So in researching some different topics related to gerontology and how other countries treat their aging population, in some countries the aging population are revered. It seems like in America it's kind of like, you're old. But really this is a special season, so how can you really make the most of this? I don't know if we'd use the term aging consciously, but really enjoying this time, because it's a good time. The kids are grown, you can enjoy the grandkids, you get to do some of the things that you want, your time is yours. So what are some tips for enjoying this really special time, the special season?
Yes, I think it is so interesting to see how different cultures treat their older citizens. I think in America, we could probably do a little bit better job of that, but what's so neat is, older adults have lived so much life. They've had so many neat experiences. And so hopefully for many, they get to enjoy this season where maybe they aren't working and they're interacting with grandkids. But to make the most of it, I think it goes back to kind of just thinking, what do I want to spend my time on? What's really important to me? For some, it may be family, and I want to spend as much time as I can with my family. For others, it might be, I want to still contribute to society. And so finding a way to do that with meaning and purpose is important. So really it's discovering, what's important to you, and then finding a way to make sure that you're able to do whatever is important. But I think I would call it successful aging. That's
successful
the term I would put to it. And it's a lot of things we've been talking about. So there's so many tips, but I think that's how I would sum it up.
So Chef Peter has just given us this delicious taco. I guess we're going to have to try this. We're getting kind of low on time here.
We're low on time, but does it smell like leftovers? That's what we need to know.
It smells like amazingness.
Yes.
Is what it actually smells like. And it's beautiful.
And I like how you use the lime wedges to hold the taco up.
Yeah, that's a useful thing to have in your repertoire. Those
Well,
little quartered
Lakeland,
limes.
I think it's time for
All
us
right,
to try
should we give it a
this.
try?
Yeah, let's try. Oh, and it's so soft too.
I know. So good.
I'm trying to think of a better word than amazing deliciousness. I can't think of it right now. It's got this perfect amount of spiciness and that blast of citrus. And it
Yes.
really does taste, it just tastes like a restaurant quality Mexican food.
You don't know, you can never tell that this was a leftover meal, you know? It seems so fresh.
I can say that this has really been transformed. Lakeland, thank you so much for joining us today. We just really appreciate your insight on this topic, showing the love to your family. Chef Peter, these leftovers really have been shown some love.
All right, glad we can do it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for the Home Instead Aging Well series. If you missed this or you want to share this with your friends, this will be up on the MCC Continuing Education Facebook page next week. Until next time, thanks.